بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So the first thing is we have a piece of unfinished business, which is the last time we met. I read for everybody some of my chains of transmission to the book of the Shifa, and I promised that I would give everyone the ijazah. So what I have done is I have printed out my ijazah, my general ijazah, which lists 17 of the major people that I narrate from. And the way the chains of transmission work is you trace your lineage or the transmission to an encyclopedia of transmissions. So if we were in like the first 300 or 400 years of Islam, we would just trace the chain of transmission back to the Prophet ﷺ. But since then, there are many people who have compiled these. I mentioned for you example, one book that the Egyptians, we trace our chains of transmission back to Al-Amir Al-Kabir. So what you need to do is you would procure that book, and then you would see where the actual chains of transmission are. And the custom is that you hear from the teacher the first hadith, which is Hadith al-Rahmah. This is the first hadith that is always taught from a teacher to a student, so I'll recite it for you inshallah. This is my chain of transmission from my teacher, Shaykh Ali Juma radiallahu anhu, who's the first hadith I heard from him, and he heard this hadith from his Shaykh, Sayyid Abdullah bin Tariq Elgawhary, and this is the first hadith he heard from him all the way back to Sufyan ibn Uyayna radiallahu anhu, who narrates from Amr ibn Dinar, who narrates from Abi Qabus Mawla Abdullah ibn Amr, who narrates from Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhum, who said, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam say, Ar-Rahimun yarhamuhum ar-Rahman irhamu man fil ard yarhamkum aw yarhamukum man fis sama'. The merciful ones receive mercy from the merciful one. Show mercy to all those on earth, and you shall be given mercy from the one in the heavens. So I pass this chain of transmission on to you, and inshallah all of what I have the right to transmit, including my published books, and inshallah now we are connected bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So I'm going to ask my students to pass these out. It's each ijazah, 5 pages. So on the last page, you will find a line. You can write your name here, and then I want you to put the date here, and then send them back to me, and I will sign them, inshallah. So أجزتكم بما يستحق لي إجازته بالشرط المعتبر عند علماء هذا الفن, and please remember me in your dua, inshallah. Actually, I'll just keep one. And for those of you that are online, inshallah, we can meet at the masjid later to do that. Okay. La, it's all the pages. It's 5 pages. Take that back, or else it's going to get lost. This is a test for both of you. Don't fail the Sheikh's test. Okay. So inshallah we embark on this new mini-series on Islamic spirituality, or a Tazkiyah, inshallah, as a kind of introduction to, there's a stapler here if you want to staple it. As an introduction to the next book that we are going to read together, which is the Risala of Imam al-Qushayri rahimahullah, which is considered the first book written in the science of tasawwuf. Of course, it's not really the first book. I mean, there were books earlier, but it's like the main book. So it's the main book that lays out the parameters of this science as a science. However, because the concept of tazkiyah, or the concept of tasawwuf or akhlaq or ihsan, of course, all of the sciences in Islam have multiple names. All of these, what I just said, is the same thing. For some reason, it's one of those things that brings a lot of misconceptions. perhaps as we do these introductory classes, we'll come across maybe a little bit why there is some. Pass that around. I don't want it. It's not mine. It's not working? Yeah, I had a doubt when I saw it. It's too small. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Maybe I should have had Kinko staple the ijaza. Anyway, khalas, whatever. So there is a lot of misconceptions. And one of the things I want to do in these introductory classes, I want you to understand that this is part of our religion. Actually, it's not a part of our religion. This is our religion. This is the heart of the Islamic method, the heart of the Islamic revelation, the heart of the practice of Islam for each individual person. This is not something extra, or this is not something else, or this is not a type of Islam, or this is not a sect of Islam, or this is not a madhab of Islam. This is Islam. This is exactly Islam. So we're going to march together slowly. What I'm going to talk about today might not seem like it has any relevance to the topic, but inshallah you will see shortly. One of the most important hadiths that we have that teach us the components of Islam is the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, that's narrated in Sahih Muslim on the authority of Umar, Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu, who was narrating that they were sitting with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and a man came who had clean white clothes, jet black hair, shadid sawad al-sha'r, shadid bayad al-thiyab. And then he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he put his knees at the Prophet's knees, and he put his hands on his thighs, either his own thighs or the thighs of the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, Ya Muhammad, ikhbirni an al-Islam. O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, teach me about Islam. And then the Prophet ﷺ replied that Islam is that you say the two shahadas, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna sayyidina Muhammad Rasulullah, that you fast, that you pray 5 times a day, that you fast the month of Ramadan, that you pay the zakah, and that you make hajj once in your life if you are able to. So Gabriel said, Sadaqt, you have spoken true. And the Sahaba said, فَعَجِبْنَا لَهُ يَسْأَلُهُ وَيُصَدِّقُهُ. We thought this was strange. He asked him, but then he told him, you were right. So he said, Ya Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, akhbirni an al-iman, tell me about faith, iman. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that you have faith in Allah, in His prophets, in the angels, in His books, in the final hour, and in destiny or qadr, it's good and it's bad. So Gabriel said, Sadaqt. And then he said, Akhbirni an al-ihsan. Tell me about ihsan, what we're about to talk about now. And he said, An ta'bud Allah ka'annaka tara, fa'in lam takun tara, fahuwa yarak. That you worship Allah as if you see Him, and if you do not know that He sees you. And then he said, Akhbirni an as-sa'a. Tell me about the final hour. And then he says, the one asking doesn't know more than the one that's asked. So he said, Akhbirni an amaratiha. Tell me about its signs. So he mentioned some of the signs of the final hour. And then he vanished. He left. So the Sahaba went, the Prophet ﷺ said, go after him. They couldn't find him. So they sat back down, and then the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Umar, atadri man as-sa'il. He said, Umar, do you know who the questioner was? He said, Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Prophet know most, best. He said, Hada Jibreel atakum yu'allimakum dinakum. This is Gabriel, he came to teach you your religion. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ referred to all of those 4 questions as the sum total of the religion. For those of you that attended Jum'ah today, I mentioned in the very beginning of the khutbah what a definition is. We said that in the science of logic, a definition is to bring together all of those basic components that are necessary for that item to be defined. So therefore, when the Prophet ﷺ said, this is Gabriel, he came to teach your religion. And in another narration, جَاءَ يُعَلِّمُكُمْ أَمْرَ دِينَكُمْ. That means that these 4 things are our religion, as defined by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is not, I'm not saying this. This is the Prophet ﷺ himself telling us these 4 things equal the religion of Islam. In other words, without these 4 things, our Islam is not complete. Without these 4 things, we don't have Islam, we have something else. The people that of bid'ah and the people that create mischief on earth and things like that, they have a non-complete Islam. Sisters Amruda, I want all the extra copies back. This is not I am saying this is not a game. This is serious, huh? This is okay. I'm just saying. So no copies and no forgeries, and don't lie about the chain of transmission to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If there are families, one per family, you can write multiple names on one ijazah. You guys don't have one? No copies, sisters. Don't give them ideas. Don't listen to sisters here. Well, I don't know how many people are going to come. I printed 30 copies. MashaAllah. Khas. Next week. Well, next week is Thanksgiving. The week after next. Alhamdulillah. You guys take one and put. You have one? Okay, give that to somebody else. What are you going to sell it? Subhanallah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Mash. Okay. So these four things are essential things, and this text is so important that Imam al-Nawawi radiallahu anhu, he includes it in his 40 hadith as one of the hadith upon which all of the religion is based. And this hadith is one of the most important texts because it is what we use to help us understand throughout Islamic history how we teach Islam and what the disciplines are required to teach Islam. So let's go through these components together so you can get an idea. Because again, I don't want you to think that ihsan or tasawwuf or tazkiyah is something extra, something other, something else. No, this is the deen. The first question that Gabriel asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, he said, tell me about Islam. What did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam respond with? Those 5 pillars of Islam, all of them are actions. The shahada is something you have to say. So all of the ulama, it's almost an issue, it is an issue of consensus that the shahada has to be spoken at least once. So you don't just, unless you can't speak, but short of that, it's something that you say, so it's an action. You have to pray, so that's an action. You have to fast, that's an action. An action through inaction, and then you break your fast, an action. You have to pay zakah, that's an action. You have to go hajj and umrah, that's an action. All of these are actions. In the study of any religion, we call the study of correct action orthopraxy. Correct action. Praxis is action. Orthopraxy, correct or sound action. So therefore, the first question that the Prophet ﷺ answered is, what is the correct action for the Muslim? Those actions are sentences that we have in our tradition that say the ruling of this action is, it's wajib. The ruling of this action is haram. The ruling of this action is, it's makruh, so on and so forth. How many of these sentences do we have in all of the sum total of all of the madhahib of Islam? About 1.2 million of these sentences. So the ulama that looked at all of the madhahib, how many madhahib are there in Islam? Over 80 madhahib, 80. Meaning there have been over 80 mujtahids in the past that have exerted their effort, looked at the Quran and Sunnah, interpreted, codified either part of a school of thought or an entire school of thought. Of course, in the Sunni world, we have the 4 complete madhahib, which are the madhab of Imam Al-A'zam, Abi Hanifa radiallahu anhu, the madhab of Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, the madhab of Sayyidina Imam Al-Shafi'i radiallahu anhu, that's the madhab I follow, and the madhab of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And then we have the Ibadis of Oman, and then we have the Zahiris, and then we have the Ithna Ashariya, the Ja'fari, 12 Imam Shias, and the Zaydis, the Shias of Yemen. These are the 8 today madhabs of Islam, the whole world of Islam, across the spread of Islam. But historically there have been over 80. So there's the madhab of Al-Awwal, and there's the madhab of Layth ibn Sa'd radiallahu anhu, which was the original madhab of Egypt, etc. Now, some of those schools don't make it throughout time because the students, there were not enough students to write and codify the madhab, or the books of the imam got lost, like Imam Al-Awwal was in Beirut, in today, present day Lebanon. He was the imam, the mujtahid of the Levant, but there was an earthquake and a lot of his books were lost. So sometimes they get lost for this reason or that reason. The ulama who looked at all of this, they said, well, if you look at all of this treasure, we can enumerate those sentences as about 1.2 million sentences. What is the ruling of this action? So Islamic law, therefore, are a series of sentences that help us understand, is this action permissible or not permissible? Is it prohibited or is it obligatory? Is it disliked? Is it recommended? Is it neutral? We have 5 Islamic rulings. We have 5 possibilities to each of those sentences. Either it's obligatory, it's wajib, which means if you do it, you are rewarded, and if you don't do it, you are punished. Or it is haram, it's prohibited, which means if you do it, you are punished, and if you don't do it, you are rewarded. Or it's makruh, it's disliked, which means if you do it, there is no sin, but if you stay away from it, you are rewarded. And then there is the mandub, which is recommended, or sunnah. If you do it, you are rewarded, and if you don't do it, there's no sin. And then there's the mubah, which is neutral. Every single sentence in the Sharia has to conclude with one of those 5. And those 5, by the way, 4 of them are things you can do. The obligatory, the disliked, the recommended, and the neutral. Only one of them, the haram, you can't do. So therefore, the majority of the sentences of Islamic law are from the realm of things that you can do, things that are permissible to do. And very few are the haram acts, the things that you have to stay away. Everyone still with me? Okay. So this is still the first question that the Prophet ﷺ was asked. Tell me about Islam. Okay? Now, for us to be able to understand these sentences from the Quran and the Sunnah, the ulama had to develop different sciences and different tools to interpret and understand these sentences correctly. Right? This is what makes those madahib, those 80 schools or over 80 schools, different from one another. The most important set of sciences that had to be developed were the sciences of the Arabic language itself. Because you cannot interpret the Quran and the Sunnah except from the original Arabic of the revelation and the original Arabic of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can read in translation for personal benefit, but you cannot derive a ruling. The ruling of this action is, and base it on a translation of a verse of the Quran or a translation from the Sunnah. It has to be from the original Arabic. So therefore, when we come to the Arabic language, we need to understand the Arabic word. So to understand the Arabic word, we go back in time to how this word was used in the past by the pre-Islamic Arabs. So any dictionary of the Arabic language, Lisan al-Arab or al-Qamus, or the dictionary of Al-Jawhari, etc. These are dictionaries that will tell you how the word is used. Now today, for example, people don't want that. They want to change what the meaning is and look to the future, but that's not how language is. You have to see how is this word used by generations and generations and generations of people. And then to understand the Arabic word, the Arabic language has something which the words change, but they are all related. This is called morphology, a sarf. So from one root, you have I said the same mistake at the Jummah. Proliferation of conjugations of that word. So daraba, to hit. You have the one who hits, darib. The one who is hit, madrub. So on and so forth. Kataba, katib, maktub, maktaba, etc. All of these are conjugations of the same word. So not only do you need to know what this word means looking backwards, you need to know the different conjugations of this word. This is called the lesser conjugation. And then there's a higher conjugation, which is most, not all, but most of the words in the Arabic language have a 3-letter root. Kataba. Kaf, ta, and ba. Kataba, to write. Or kalama, a word or to speak. But sometimes you can change those letters. Kalama, you have lakama. What does lakama mean? To punch. Okay? What does malaka mean? To own. So here we have the word, kalima, and the word to punch, lakama, and then the word to own, malaka. All have the meme, all have the kaf, the lam, and the meme, but in different orders. So the ulama look at that and say, well, what is the unifying theme of that root or those letters? Is power. Word is power. To punch is power. To own is power, etc. This is called the greater conjugation. And sometimes the letters don't mean anything, they mean gibberish. But this is another form of, all of this is from the word. But then the word is not by itself, the word is in a sentence. So to understand the Arabic sentence, you need to understand grammar. Where is the subject? Where is the object? Where is the verb? So on and so forth. The adjective, a sifa or a nat. Okay, and this is, the sentence is, to understand the sentence is grammar. So here we have grammar, we have morphology, we have lexicography, okay, to know how the word means in the dictionary. And then when we read passages together, is this statement literal or is it metaphoric? Is this statement general or is it specific? How do you understand? So this is part of the science of rhetoric. And in Islamic rhetoric, we have 3 sub-sciences under al-balagha. All of this is just the Arabic language. The sciences needed to understand the Quran and the Sunnah. Why? Because we're still in the first question that Gabriel asked the Prophet ﷺ, what is Islam? So all of this is to interpret how we act and how we function. So all of these sciences came together just to explain this realm of Islam. We call these the Sharia sciences. The science of fiqh, which are the ruling of this is such and such. And then the principles behind that, the interpretive principles behind that is called usul al-fiqh. Usul al-fiqh is the most unique science that Muslims codified that was new to human history. This is one of our unique contributions to human history, which articulates how we know what we know. What are the principles that we use to interpret the Quran and Sunnah? So all of the things that I just mentioned, I kind of presented it to you that they are individual sciences. But when you study usul al-fiqh, all of that is taken as one science. How do you interpret the verses of the Quran, the instructions of the Prophet ﷺ, vis-a-vis our actions? Now, in the Quran, we have 6,236 verses. Of those verses, about 300 to 400 deal with the Sharia. And we have about 120,000 texts of hadith, including all of the repetitive narrations. Of those, about 2,000 to 3,000 deal with the Sharia. So in this first question that Gabriel asked the Prophet ﷺ, we are talking about less than 3% of the Quran and Sunnah is the Sharia. And to understand that 3%, we need all of these tools to be able to understand. The shahada, the prayer, the fasting, the zakah, and the hajj. Because of course, these are not the only actions we have, but we have business transactions, and we have financial transactions, and we have marriage and divorce, and we have inheritance, and we have torts, and we have crimes and punishment, and we have warfare, and we have the dhabiha, the food that we eat, so on and so forth. And then, did I lose anybody? Everybody still with me? Okay. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. And then the second question Gabriel asked about Iman. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that Iman is to have belief in, and he named the core articles of belief. So the belief, the study of correct belief in a religion is called orthodoxy. Correct belief. So the first one was orthopraxy, correct action. So we have to have correct action based on a correct interpretation of the Quran and Sunnah. And we also have to have correct belief, also based on a correct interpretation of the Quran and Sunnah. Thank God the same tools we need for correct actions are the same tools that we need for correct belief. So we don't have another set of tools. But in the science of our theology, if we said that in Islamic law there's about 1.2 million points of law, if you take all of the madhahib together, In the science of theology, first of all, how many schools of theology do we have? In Sunni Islam, we have two schools. We have the Ash'ari school and the Maturidi school. And then historically there were other schools like the Mu'tazilites and the Jabriyya and all of that. But I mean, those didn't make it. Except with the exception of the Mu'tazilites, some of the Mu'tazilite theology is adopted by modern day Shia theology. But in the world of Sunni Islam, we have the two madhabs of the Ash'ari and the Maturidi. And then some people, they include the approach that is found amongst some of the Hanbali schools that is in reality an early version of the Ash'ari school. There is a link, not always direct, between the schools of theology and the schools of law. All of the Malikis, they're all Ash'ari. As a matter of fact, in Morocco, they say that they have something called Thawabit ad-Din. These are the things that are the indisputable principles of religion. Sahih? Thawabit ad-Din is the recitation, in Morocco, is the recitation of Warsh, is the madhab of Imam Malik, is the Ash'ari school, and the tasawwuf that's attributed to Imam al-Junayd radiallahu anhu, which we'll get to maybe next class. Most of the Hanafis are Maturidi, but not necessarily. And then between the Hanbalis and the Shafi'is, it's a split between the Ash'aris and some Maturidis sprinkled here or there. But because the Hanafi school was adopted by the Ottoman Empire as its official madhab, and because the Hanafi madhab is the largest madhab and it grew up largely in the eastern part of the various Islamic empires, the Maturidi school of theology was primarily there, whereas the Ash'ari school was more like in the Hijaz and North Africa and things like that. That's not really important, that's a historical thing. The two schools are essentially the same. There's very few differences between them. Most of those differences are just difference of language of how they identify and articulate certain theological issues. Now, if we have 1.2 million points of law, how many points do we have in theology? Alhamdulillah, much less. It's a couple thousand. That's it. Very easy, nice and tight. But theology in Islam is divided into three subcategories. There is theological beliefs related to Allah. Okay, obviously. We call these ilahiyat, things that we believe about Allah. And then we have things related to the Prophet ﷺ and all of the Anbiya, which we call nubuwat. And then we have the things that we hear that will happen at the end of time and life beyond death, which we call al-sam'iyat, things that we hear. That part of our theology is what is termed in the study of religion as eschatology, the study of end of life or end of the world scenarios and life beyond death. So the last set of questions, the last question that Gabriel asked the Prophet ﷺ, tell me about the signs of the final hour, this is really, in the study of Islam, part of our theology. So theology has three parts: things about God, things about the Prophets ﷺ, and things about end of time and life beyond death. There are two madhabs in Sunni Islam and about 2,000, 2,500 points if you were to enumerate them all. But they are very deep points, and if you look at the deep books of theology, it's almost like you're reading a philosophical text, because what is the nature of matter? What is the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do you understand Allah ta'ala's essence versus Allah ta'ala's attributes, His sifat, and things like that. So it can become very deep and technical. And then Gabriel asked the Prophet ﷺ about ihsan. Okay, ihsan is one of those words, it's like a unique word to the Arabic language without doubt. But ihsan, used elsewhere by the Prophet ﷺ, is excellence. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allah kataba al-ihsan ala kulli shay," that Allah has demanded and prescribed excellence on anything. So when you do something, you do it to the best of your ability. If you're going to slaughter, that's the rest of the hadith, slaughter the best you can. If you're going to learn Islam, learn it the best you can. If you're going to do your profession, do it the best you can. If you're going to go to school to study to get a degree, do it the best you can, so on and so forth. So what is excellence as it relates to our religious life? And the Prophet ﷺ said this statement that most people have memorized, that you worship Allah as if you see Him. And if you do not know that He sees you, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فهو يراك. So this is one of the Prophet ﷺ's beautiful statements. He was given Jawami' al-Kalim. One of his special attributes is he was able to summarize huge things in just short amount of words. This was one of his qualities of excellence. What does that mean, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see Him? Because that really relates to the state of being. This is like how you are all the time. If the Sharia, the first question that Gabriel asked, only deals with about 3% of the revealed text, the Quran and Sunnah, the rest of the Sharia, the rest of the primary text deals with this issue, about how you are supposed to be, how you're supposed to act, how do you overcome low inclinations, how can you have that, how do you live each moment and you know that and you see Allah. What does it mean to see Allah? Because in our belief we know that Allah is not an object, and Allah is not something that I can sit there and stare at and draw and make a statue of. Because the Quran says لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. The kaf in this verse is an extra. Grammatically it's extra. Here we are using the tools of language, meaning you don't need that kaf for the sentence to make sense. But there are no extras in the Quran. It's Allah's revealed, it's Allah's speech. So why is that kaf there? That extra letter emphasizes that not only is there nothing like Allah, there are no categories to which Allah Ta'ala can be compared to. So in this verse, Allah negates any likeness and any concept, anything that Allah Ta'ala can be like. We'll talk about this in the next class, inshallah, because there's an important teaching here about how we understand matter and the created world. So what does it mean to see Allah then? If you can't see Him like this, like I see the pen, or I see you and you see me, what does it mean to see Allah? But I can't do that. What does it mean that I know that Allah sees me all the time? How can I be aware of Allah Ta'ala's presence all the time? So you see, this is a fundamental question that permeates the vast majority of our day. The vast majority of our day is not spent in the Sharia, is not spent in the Aqidah, it's spent in Tazkiyah, it's spent in Ihsan. Because it's something that requires us to be always cognizant of Allah Ta'ala's awareness. Just like we have tools to understand what our correct action is, just like we have tools to understand our correct belief, we are going to use these same exact tools. Go to the Quran and Sunnah to answer this question. What does it mean to worship Allah as if you see Him? What does it mean to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you? So hopefully by now you can see what I said in the outset, that this is not something extra. This is not something other than. This is not a sect or a madhab or a type of Islam. This is Islam. Because the Quran, the Islam and the Iman discussions really deal with a small subset statistically of the Quran and the Sunnah. The vast majority of the revealed text deals with this issue of ihsan. Now, where I think, and I'll end with this, where I think people have misconceptions is that, like Islam in the Hadith is divided into the different schools of Islamic law, and like theology in the Hadith is divided in the two major schools of Islamic theology, also ihsan has been institutionalized in different orders, different ways of how you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll come to talk about that more in the next class, because there are tools that we are going to use. As a matter of fact, the two most important tools that we use in Tazkiyah, Anas read in the first rak'ah of the Isha prayer. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض. The remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dhikr, and the reflection and the contemplation on Allah's creation, fikr, are the two tools that we need to have that polish on our hearts, because this is the organ that ihsan deals with, because this is the the organ that we use to experience Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ said, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ سِقَالَةٍ. Everything has a polish. وَسِقَالَةِ الْقُلُوبِ ذِكْرُ اللَّهِ. And the polish of the heart is the remembrance of Allah Jalla wa Ala. So we'll talk about that in the next lecture. So the issue of Tazkiyah is just like Islamic law and just like Islamic theology have been institutionalized in schools. We also have schools of ihsan. These different schools of ihsan historically have been known by orders or tariqah or a way, a path. And they have different names. And while we have the 80-some schools of Islamic law and the 2 schools of Islamic theology, to make things more complicated, we have thousands and thousands of orders. We have thousands and thousands of ways to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They say, عدد الطرائق على عدد أنفاس الخلائق. The number of paths to Allah is equal to the number of people. Why? Because in reality, each one of us has our own way of I can only be me, I can't be you. You can't be me. So therefore, there's my own way of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Following the Quran and Sunnah, but the way I interact with this verse and the way I interact when I fast or when I pray or when I give charity is going to be different than each one of you. And each one of you's experience is different from one another. So each one of you has your own individualized path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there have been an institutionalizing of the dhikr, the remembrance and the contemplation, which we'll get to. And I think this is where people have the misconception that they think that this is something other than. Anybody who does not follow the Quran and Sunnah is not worshiping Allah. That's the best way I can put it. Your correct action has to follow the Quran and Sunnah. Your correct belief has to follow the Quran and Sunnah. Your correct ihsan and tazkiyah has to follow the Quran and Sunnah. There is no way to Allah except through the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But in order to understand that way, you need to have those interpretive tools so that you are understanding the Quran and Sunnah correctly. Because if you don't understand the Quran and Sunnah correctly, you will have a false deduction. I'm going to pause here to keep you desiring more, inshallah, and we will continue after Thanksgiving, bi'idhnillah. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Let me know if there are any questions, and please bring me the ijazas. Somebody collect them and I'll sign them for you. Yeah. I have a pen. Naam? Naam? I can't hear. Okay, let me know how many there are. I need it. So let me know how many extra, and we'll make. You guys don't have a pen to write your names?
Did you write your names, please?
Who has written their name?
Nobody was writing because they were giving them copies. They are supposed to write their names themselves.
Then you write your names and bring it back next week.
Next time.
If you have the name written, bring it to me. Yeah, I can't do everything for everyone.
You need pens? You want me to give you the pens, everyone, or you will bring next time?
Bring next time. Bring next time. Anybody who signed it, they put their name, I'll sign it now. Are there any questions about what we talked about this evening?
So, Imam,
yes. Here's a question.
Yes, here's a question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I wanted to link it with the
Guys, be quiet because I can't hear the question, please. No.
Yeah, I want to link the hadith with the ayah from the Quran to understand better.
Naam?
The ayah in the Quran where Allah says, لا تقولوا آمنا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. So it seems to suggest that these are two separate things, but you describe them as
أيوة.
as one.
وقالت الأعراب أسلمنا قل لا تقولوا أسلمنا ولكن قولوا لا تقولوا آمنا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. قالت الأعراب آمنا. فهم, they just entered in Islam, they say we believe. So Allah says, لا, you didn't believe yet, say أسلمنا. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلُ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُم. But the faith still has not come into your heart. Because Iman, as we read in the hadith, is a function of the heart. I believe in, etc., etc., etc.
So then the meaning is that the deen is bigger than that definition of Islam or the orthopraxy that you described.
أيوة الإسلام أكبر من المسلمين. Islam is bigger than the Muslims, absolutely, because everyone, people have their own experience. فإحنا we can't make something confined, صح? Any other questions? The date.
So Imam Tariq, if we don't know the Arabic grammar, we can't understand Quran. So it is obligatory, actually mandatory to learn the Arabic grammar, which we don't know.
You can understand a general meaning, but you can't derive rulings.
Yeah, we can do that, but not the Arabic grammar. That is hard for us.
Well, we learn.
We have to learn, right? Thank you.
Anybody else? والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون.
These are all the